everyone. Welcome back to The Missing Link. As we sort of stated when we first started doing this, there's going to be times when we're going to be interviewing people and other times like now where we'll run out of people. So we're actually going to sit down and just discuss compliance. There's a lot that we do in our business here. So I've got Brendon here. How are you, Brennos?
Very well, mate. Thank you.
That's good. Thanks for coming on. Brendon's normally the one doing everything in the background of this, and I'm the talker. So but when we're doing our compliance business, we work side by side, and we've learned a lot over the years, probably too much, and we see too much, and it makes us realise that it can happen to anybody. The whole idea of the missing link was to pretty much explain to people what can go wrong, how it can go wrong, but more what you've got to do to combat it. So having the different people on that we interview on here are going to be, some of them will be talking about incidents that they've been through, and other things we're just going to be discussing how you actually have to do things and the best practice. Because I did get someone get in touch with me the other day and was saying, what courses can I do to try and help me with running my business? And I said to her, look, there's no real courses that are out there. The only thing you do is learn by experience, and that's what we've learned.
Yeah, and that's probably the hard part is that, I mean, there's a lot of courses out there like chain of responsibility courses and fatigue management courses and load restraint courses and that sort of thing, but a lot of them are quite generic, unfortunately, and they probably have to be, I guess, to try and cover, such a vast industry. There's so many different types of work that people are doing within the transport industry, so to make a course for it would be extremely difficult. So that's probably one of the things that we try and do, is to try and tailor our training for the company that we're working for. So it is hard to try and point people in the direction of a course, because as you said, there's just not a specific course out there that can teach you this type of stuff. You've got to learn, through experience, I guess, like we have and like a lot of people have, is you just got to be in it and be, trying to improve each day. And unfortunately, we can't point them to a course. We'd love to be able to, because it'd make things a hell of a lot easier, but it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. When I first kicked off, so Brendon and I, our backgrounds are that both of us drove. We did drive trucks, only locally, pretty much around Sydney. We didn't really do any stuff going away. I probably did a little bit more going away than what you did.
Yeah, a bit of country stuff sort of down Melbourne way and that sort of thing. Yeah, not too much.
Yeah, it was mainly truck and dog work, doing quarrying work, doing some excavation work and what have you, mud carters, everyone likes to call it. So yeah, we were mud carters. But from there, we moved into allocations and then roles like that, and then into management roles before we got into doing this. So that's the stepping stone, really. You've got to start off somewhere, and to have a good understanding of how this works, there has to be some sort of an operations background, I think, in what you've done. If you're going to be doing any sort of consulting work, you have to know the bones of it and what people go through and what drivers go through. And even when we had Paul Alsbury on here, and there was a number of comments there, like him being from the regulator, and there was comments that came back, something about, I wonder how many miles he's done. Well, he probably hasn't done any, because he's a friggin' lawyer, not a truck driver. And so we need the bureaucratic people there that are going to help us with some things, and unfortunately not all of them help, and we do know that. We're not blind to that. But we try and look at it very objectively, because we know that there's reasons for it when you see it from the other side.
Yeah, no, you don't, get your accountant in and expect him to have done, a whole heap of miles behind the wheel either, do you? Because he's an accountant.
That's right.
But he's good at what he does, or she's good at what she does. It's so it's easy to point the finger and say, what would they know? And all they need to know is that side of it. They do definitely need to know and be able to relate to the industry and the people in it and what they go through. And I think that's probably what helps us a lot in what we do, is that we have been, we started out as drivers and sort of worked through and saw and seen, different aspects of businesses and what people go through, the challenges they face and how things can affect them. So that definitely helps us, being able to relate to people and what they go through. And then rather than just going in and trying to put systems in place that are just not realistic, from an operations perspective, and they're just not going to work in the real world. It might look great on paper. And I think that's probably one of the challenges that I think the regulator has, is that they just don't have those people, with that really strong operations background when they're there developing systems or developing regulations, I guess. They're trying to work within the law, so they have boundaries as well, and they don't actually make the law either. So I can see it from both sides where there's real challenges there.
And you have to be objective and look at it from both sides.
Yeah.
And look, there are a few people in the National Vehicle Regulator that have come from the industry. We've dealt with them. They're very, very down to earth, and they're really good people to talk to because they do get it from the perspective of an operator. And obviously I can't call out some names there, but there's definitely some people in there that have got that background. But I think at times they probably face the challenges as well. Let's look at you, Brennos, when you first were driving and then you went to allocations. Now, when you're driving, you think that you can understand how that business runs, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that was one of the big things that sort of stood out for me is that as a driver, everything revolves around your day and what you're doing and how it affects you. But when you move into allocations, you times that by, 10, 20, 100, depending on how many trucks you got on the road, how many drivers you got there, how many sales reps are barking at you to try and get things done quicker. And, it's then
the accountant comes in and sits down with his pie chart and tells you how productive they've been there. And you've only run them at 53% loaded and they should be running at 55.5 and you're going, and it's mental, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also when you're driving, you're sort of like, why have they sent me here? And how come he's doing that job? And you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I'd often said, I reckon that every truck driver, when they get a gig at a place, should go and spend a week in the allocations department before they get out behind the wheel. Yeah. No company will do that, but I think that that'd be a good idea so that they just shut up and do their job.
Well, it certainly changes your perspective on things, that's for sure. Makes you understand that, there's probably a million ways things could be done, and you might find fault in the way that they're doing things, and someone might come in and say, why'd you do that way? But there's probably a reason why they did it that way, and they could have done it another way, but that's the way they chose. And
and it's always easy in hindsight because
yeah.
you make a plan to do something and then it can change. And it's different if you're doing line haul and you've basically just got a roster and you run down to that end, you get unloaded and then you get reloaded somewhere else and you come back. But when you're running stuff like truck and dogs running around Sydney, and you're back and forth and you've got different loads. And it's different doing excavation work where you just got to keep moving material out of that job and go and tip it.
But when you're doing that
quarry work is full on. Yeah. When you've just got concrete plants you're filling up, like, the Campsons days. Yeah. And having to run back and forth and everything was done with a pencil and a rubber on a piece of paper. Yeah. And you're constantly shuffling them around and you can't cross empty trucks.
Yeah. It changed all day long. Yeah. It's just changing constantly. You're getting calls, I need a load here, I need this done here. And so your plan looks great at the start of the day. By the end of the day, it looks nothing like what it did at the start of the day.
Yeah.
So
you can't just sit back and let it happen.
No. And that's, I think, we've been into businesses where they can do that, because that's the type of work that they're doing. Like you're saying, like with line haul, it's, a lot of it's sort of pretty set runs and that sort of thing. But those businesses that are really reactive and that's probably one of the things I've always found hard, especially with fatigue, because the regulator expects you to be planning well in advance and giving drivers notice well in advance on what they're doing. But in the real world, depending on the industry they're in, that doesn't work. You're reacting to what the work says, not to what you planned 2 days earlier so that you could tell your driver in time and give them plenty of notice. So it's hard.
And here's the crunch with Brennos and myself. So Brendon we've worked with each other for, ProDrive's been going for 14 years. So I kicked it off originally and then we started working with each other. But you and I knew each other before that. We'd worked in business together. I think the first time that we really met and started work together, I was working for a company as a transport manager. You came in as a driver, and I thought, I wonder how this guy would go as an allocator because we needed a decent allocator there. The one thing that I've learned about Brendon, he's got this memory which is absolutely phenomenal. He can hear a song once and he remembers the damn words all the way through, and he might mess one up and goes, I'm not that good. Yeah, we possibly, he might just make them up. But what he's got is this phenomenal memory. And my love is trucks, as everyone knows. Brendon's is football, and he can go back to, I don't know what era, and can tell you who played, who got sent off, who got sin binned every game. He's just unbelievable. So where that works really well for us is...
My family don't think I've got a memory that good, but yeah,
Well,
if I'm talking about rugby league, yeah, it's probably
there
a
you
different
go.
story. Yeah.
And so it probably goes back to when you look at what it's like back at school. And I never retained anything. I was too busy focused on trucks. And you go to school to learn if you can retain information or not, to learn how to learn, as a teacher told me one time. And some people have got a brain and they can retain information. People like me that have got a bit of ADHD and that sort of thing is scattered, and that's why it's very, very hard. But I can retain the stuff that I want to retain, hence the truck side of it there, and I can remember. The way that it works in our business is that, firstly, Brendon will remember a conversation that we've had with someone there. Well, I don't. It's just in one ear and out the other, and he can recall things that have been sent, and said in conversation. If there's emails that have been sent, he can go back and find them, and then where to find something in our massive computer system there, where we've got files and stuff galore. And even when you go down to a manual and what's in it here and what's written there, and when it comes to the law and everything, where I'm probably more on the mechanics. I can remember the weights of the vehicles and what they're meant to be. I can remember, I'd reckon, just about every company I've worked with, the fleet number of the truck, what engines they were running, what transmissions, what rear ends, problems that they had with them there, which one had small hole Alcoas on the steer, which one had a big hole, which one had a different pinstripe set up on the tanks, all the irrelevant shit.
Well, not really. It's not really relevant. It's important stuff, and it's stuff that there's no chance I'd ever remember any of that stuff. Like, I just,
but
because I'm not interested in it, I just, like you said, in one ear and out the other, for me, with that sort of detail. And that, probably one of the things I probably struggle with is the weights. Numbers is probably not my, forte, not my strong point, and you seem to be able to know exactly, that sort of stuff is the stuff that you retain. So I think that probably helps us in a way where, strengths and weaknesses, and
it becomes a yin and yang. And I think that in business, the first thing you got to do is understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then work on them. So we've learnt to really accept that. I think working with each other is when we've really embraced that that's how we are. And that's where that objectiveness comes in. You go into some places and instead of going, why the hell don't they know this? We realise that a lot of companies just don't know it. They are good at what they do, but there's some things that they don't understand. Compliance is the last thing that people are really going to want to be interested in. But then you get some people that take it on and they want to know it and they do want to learn it. But it's not an easy thing.
No.
So when you look at this episode here, and because we're sort of kicking off talking about allocations, probably what we should start talking about first and foremost will be fatigue. And which is not what we were going to talk about. Brendon's looking at me funny. But I'm thinking when it comes to fatigue, what we've got to look at is what happens when a notice comes in. So how do we get our knowledge, mate? Let's look at that first. We've learnt it from being auditors for the NHVR, for being conducting our own audits, for being involved with companies that are getting audited by a third party. So they might have Woolworths come and audit them, or Linfox or Boral or whoever else, AMCAS audits. Yeah. And then also from notices. So from that very first one that I got involved with, which was a tipper company years ago, and they were issued a notice. I'd only just started off in compliance, and this company contacted me and they'd been issued a notice from the regulator. Now, it was actually from the RMS back at that time. Now, I'd never seen a notice before, and I looked at it and I thought, I think these guys are going to go to jail, and they weren't. But they had a number of overloads. So let's look at the truck and dog industry to start with. When you get down to the axle mass measurement adjustments that they give you, MMAs, and it is actually a thing. And it's more a line of defence, the MMA. So this means that when you've got a truck that's going over a weighbridge, and if you get a truck that's been knocked off and they give you a printout, you'll see the weight that they've given you, that what you actually are, I should say. Then they'll have an adjustment that they take off. So if it's a truck and 3-axle dog, they'll take off 300 kilos on the steer. So every truck, they'll take 300 off the steer. They'll take 500 off a bogey group, 500 off a tri group. And I mentioned a 3-axle dog because on a single axle dolly, they'll take 400 off. Yeah. On a twin steer truck, they'll take 300 off the steer. What they do is reduce those weights back down. And if you're under, well, then you're okay. But if you're still over, bang, you're gone. But over the whole vehicle, they'll only give you 250 kilos. Yeah. So if your gross on a truck and quad dog is allowed to be 57.5 tonne, they'll only allow you to go up to 57 0.750. And if you, the moment you go over that, you're gone. So, and that's with the person sitting in it, because the truck weighs that when you're driving along. So a lot of people say, oh, you know, how come they're doing it? If I hop out of it, I'm okay. That's true. But that's where they do it. They've got to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah.
So those weights are the first thing that come in. But when you have a look at the different areas of transport, it's very hard. When you've got trucks that are getting loaded with pallets, they've got to place those pallets and they can get thrown out very easily. And that's why they do the measurement adjustment. Obviously, if the pallets are moved backwards a bit, it might take the weight off the driver, off the steer, and it'll be okay. So it's all on placement. When you get trucks that are loaded into a quarry and they're getting loaded by a front end loader, they're getting loaded with gravel. They're always clean in the bins because they're just loading quarry material only. And then they have a front end loader load them. And then they go over a weigh bridge. The really good weigh bridges will check every axle group, and then off they go. But then you get the ones that are doing excavation work, and these poor buggers struggle because they're normally on a hill. Some run excavators that have got scales in them, some don't. And it's not about where you put it, it's not about how much weight goes in the back of the bin, it's where you place it. And that can be a bit of an issue. And those guys have still got to run into those same mass measurement adjustments so they can get done on. And they're really, really hard to get right, like almost impossible to get right.
Loading clay or sandstone or,
Mate.
really hard. Hard for the operators, you know, the bloke on the excavator. And that's a challenge too for the companies, for the drivers, is because, you know, the guy that's loading you today might be a different guy tomorrow. You know, the level of competency might be different there. So, you know, the first guy might know exactly how much to put in, gets it spot on every time. The next guy, not so much. So, yeah, really challenging that different material. And as you said, loading out of, you know, holes in the suburbs, in the city, that sort of stuff, where the sites aren't set up for a truck to be sitting level where, you know, the gauges are going to read correctly, all that sort of stuff. It's really, really hard in that, doing that excavation work. It's so
and those air gauges are a bit of a problem as well because they are just an indicator. They to give you a bit of an idea. Unless you go and spend 14 or so grand and set them up with proper load cells in there, which is a lot of money on a truck and dog combination. If you've got a fleet of 15 of them as well, it's a lot of money. Yeah. So to go and put those in there, a lot of them will just run air pressure gauges on there, and they have one wheel that's up on a bit of a mound. It can throw it out a bit, but it's not that much. We'll throw it out a little bit. The worst thing is that if you pull the maxis on a truck, they will actually stop the airflow to the dog, and therefore when you release the maxis and then all the air starts charging in, by the time you pull out onto the road and the scales go off the Richter and you think, I'm over. Now what do? If you're in Coward Street in the middle of the city at Mascot, do you try and go around the block and get back into the site, tip off? A lot of them won't let you tip off on site because it's too dangerous and it's unstable.
There's no room.
And room's the issue. So the regulator will give you that perfect world where they'll turn around and say, well, you should just do them on level ground and you should be an area to put mobile scales and you should do this and that. And that, again, is because we're dealing with people that haven't worked in the industry and worked in that operations industry there. So they're going to come out with rules like that. So you need to be able to address those rules. And it's not easy to address those rules.
No, not in the real world, it's not. No, it makes it really hard.
So you've got to have practices in place. So let's focus on fatigue here, okay? Because we started to drift off on mass. There's such a vast area there, but let's focus on fatigue. So the first thing you've got to look at with fatigue is, where does this work on standard hours, right? Now, we know that with the new SMS coming out, the hours are going to be changing from what we understand. I suppose we can say this because we've been told this. From what we understand on fatigue management, I think that standard hours are still just standard hours. But from what you understand, I think there's going to be maybe half a dozen different tables that are going to be offered for fatigue management, for BFM, where you have a choice of tables. And when you run your certificate of, what's it called again?
Authorisation?
Well, that's the one, the authorisation certificate, thank you, which basically states that you're working for that company underneath their fatigue management system when you're on accreditation. So NHVS, old scheme, it's now going to be called HVA. Yes, HVA. There's a lot of different terms
so it'll be the GSA, so the General Safety Accreditation, and then there's the ACA, so the Alternative Compliance Accreditation. So that's where you'll go up to, like, that'll include your mass and your fatigue. So I think the GSA is going to include maintenance, and then mass and fatigue will be under ACA. So if you want, obviously, all three, then you'll have to be ACA.
And that's where your memory's so damn good, because you realise things that I'm not.
Yeah, I had to read it a few times, though, to get my head around it.
So from what we understand, there's going to be like 5 or 6 different tables, and when you have that accreditation certificate there to say that authorisation notice that you have, you'll have to, let's say they're numbered 1 to 6, you've got to say what table you're working under, and that's what your fatigue's working under.
I think what they'll do is probably just work off some of the really common advanced fatigue management models that people are using. That's probably where they're going to go with it. So there'll be some variations there on what one you choose and what's going to work best for your business, which I think it's a good thing, rather than sort of be pigeonholed into you've got to be doing these hours and take the breaks at these times. I think if you can find one that's going to work best for your business, I think that's a far better option. Hopefully it's a positive. We don't know what that looks like yet, so we're all sort of just guessing at the moment.
And we're 6 weeks out from the middle of the year, and we're still not too sure what it looks like.
Quickly,
And the regulator is a bit unsure what it looks like yet. They're giving it to us in bits and pieces there. So I think this SMS is going to be sort of pushed backwards a little bit, or push it a bit further away to give them a bit of breathing space and give us a bit of breathing space to put it in. So with these hours that are getting put forward, as Brendon was saying, you've got to find the one that best suits your model. Everyone's been complaining about the fatigue laws and saying that they're too stringent. They're very, very strict, and because the industry is so diverse. So it's hard to have rules and regs about the industry being so diverse. A lot of people say, why can't you just let us do what we want? And it's because statistics have shown that fatigue is the biggest thing. When there's an incident, it's down to drive fatigue. You let people do what they want, they fall asleep. Because some people can get it really, really well, but we've got that issue there where we're governed to perform as the slowest denominator and the lowest denominator in society. And so we have to make sure that we've got rules and regs in for those people, where a lot of people are really switched on. And I think,
it's risk management. So it's all about risk management. So where's the risk? All the risk is fatigue. That's one of the major risks in, heavy vehicle transport. So, they can't just let people do whatever they want. Like that's not going to happen, unfortunately, because there'd be plenty of people out there that if they were left to do whatever they want, they'd be fine. But the vast majority wouldn't be, and we'd be seeing, far more accidents on the road and people falling asleep, and, it'd be the Wild West. So
that's right.
Unfortunately, that's never going to happen. So, that's a pipe dream.
And gone are the days of driving an old slimline Kenworth or a white Road Commander there with a 15 overdrive and an 871 keeping you awake and driving hard and around windy roads and everything. Nowadays, they're super comfortable. They're super quiet. You're on freeways. And I've said before plenty of times on Copy Southbound, the first thing that I'll do when I go home and sit on a lounge is fall asleep. So if you're sitting in a lounge chair like that and they're all nice and comfortable, that's, to me, the other thing there that's going to happen is you're going to nod off when you're relaxing.
So you're not changing gears.
And so there's not much thought process in it. And that's just the way that it's going. Better for fuel. So the fuel economy is a big thing. Better for wear and tear on the vehicle, etc. And allowing less skilled operators to get in behind the wheel, which is probably a bit of concern. It's probably a thing that's happened that people weren't expecting, but that's what's happening now. But, the drivers aren't growing on trees either, so people are taking what they can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a real challenge for them. And, we can all sit there and complain about the people that are coming into the industry as drivers, but we need them. Companies need drivers, they need bums in seats. So I think the challenge is for regulators and the industry as a whole, and operators out there, is to make sure that you're training your people right. If you're putting people on, what does that look like? How much education are you giving them as an operator and as an owner of vehicles? And they're getting in behind your truck, behind the wheel of your truck. What are you doing to educate them? You can't just assume that they know because they've got a license.
That's right. That's right.
Or they told you they've been working for 15 years for someone else. What were their practices like?
That's right.
What bad habits are they going to bring into your business?
That's right. Yeah, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
So when we have a look at the fatigue system here, let's have a look at some of the things that we've seen when we've been involved with either audits or investigations when there's been some sort of an incident or accident.
Notices,
Notices to produce have been sent through. What are they looking at? Now, I'd say probably most of the notices we see will be focused around fatigue. Mainly because I think that would be the biggest thing that the regulator sees. The biggest concern that they have is fatigue. So let's have a look at what it is, work and rest. Now, some people are going to be saying, we're not stupid, this is obvious, okay? But we're just going to start at the beginning so that we're not missing anything here and make it very, very clear.
Yeah, and I mean, people are going to have different levels of knowledge too. So we'd rather educate, the people from the ground up rather than let's just skip past that bit. But the people that don't know that bit need to know. So, we want to try and cover everything if we can.
Exactly, and how people get caught out.
Yeah.
So work is everything to do with the vehicle. So we've got from the time you put your key in the door and you're opening the door up of the truck, you are considered as working, right? This is getting down to the letter of the law. You climb up into the vehicle, you throw your bag and everything inside, you hop out, if you're diligent, we'll check the water and oil. Some places don't bother doing that. Other people want you to do it and expect you to do it. Probably depends on the industry a little bit, but it just depends. So you're doing your pre-trip checks and you're going to fire the truck up, kick her in the guts, and you're going to walk around and do your pre-trip inspection. Pre-trip is considered as work. Now, on a work diary, for the guys that are still filling out a paperwork diary, you've got that little box up the top right-hand corner that you can fill in there where you put down pre-trip inspection. We see people get caught out by filling in a time there that, let's say it's 2:45 a.m. that they've done their pre-trip. They fill in 2:45, but they start their work diary at 3:30 in the morning. A pre-trip is regarded as working. You have to make sure that that time corresponds with your start time on your work diary, even if it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So what can happen is we'll go into a company, we'll be having a look at what they're doing. We have a look at their telematics, because most people are running telematics now of some sort. And the driver's put down that he started work at 5 a.m. and you can see the driver's walked in there at 4 o'clock in the morning and he's done his pre-trip and the ignition's gone on in the truck. That's a red flag straight away to any auditor. And if it's a red flag to us, it's going to be a red flag to the NHVR. So if there's an incident, that's what they're going to see. And straight away, the company will actually get done for that. They're going to say, well, how come this driver's started at 4? You've got down that he started at 5. We'll say, well, his start time was 5. But he's opened the door at 4. So regardless of what you think and think this is ridiculous, this is what they look at. The moment you turn that ignition on, you've started. You have to log a start time there.
Yeah. And then even further into that is that they'll look at that work diary against what the tracking system says. Well, it says that you've fired it up at this time and you've driven out the gate because you wanted to get there early, but your start time was 5 and you've got on your work diary 5, so you've falsified that record. And that's fraud.
Yes. And that is. And fraud is a $13,310 fine is what I think it is at the moment there for fraud on a work diary.
So I wouldn't remember that.
You wouldn't? Yeah, I remember that. I get worried about money. And so what that means is if you do a fraudulent entry, so if you knowingly put an entry into your work diary, let's say that you've had a break, but you haven't had a break, but you just put down that you've had one, you knowingly don't, that is fraud. Yeah. That's on a legal document. That's what that fine is for that. We have seen people, drivers, get knocked off for that amount.
Yeah. Yeah, a number of times,
yes.
on more than one occasion. And that's the thing. Typically, when you see that sort of stuff, where he fires it up at this time, but on his work diary it's this time. It's not just that one day that he's done it, or he or she's done it. It's day after day after day, and it becomes just what they do.
Yeah.
So.
And you will get prosecuted and you will go to court. And you're here thinking, golly, haven't heard anyone saying that. And that's fine because no one's going to go on Instagram and tell you all that they just got knocked off for that.
No,
they're not going to put a post up there and they're not going to have a laugh about it. They're all going to be sitting there with their tail between their legs because they've been done.
Yeah, you don't exactly want to advertise that, do you?
That's
but
right.
I mean, it's reality. It's what we've seen happen. And just something for people to be aware of. Like you said, making sure that the time that you're starting is the actual time that you've started, not 15 minutes later. And one of the things that we've seen happen a lot, and especially in the excavation game, is guys trying to get to the front of the queue first. So they get given a 5 a.m. start time to be down on site at 6 a.m. or whatever it might be, but they're starting at 4 a.m. to get down there at 5, and then they'll stop for an hour down there, but they're first in line. But then that throws everything out.
Yep.
They didn't get told to start at that time, and it throws their fatigue out for the end of the day. It's just,
it can mess them up with their hours at the end of the day. They can breach because if they've had a late night the night before, they can actually breach. When they do that, they give themselves that early start to get down there. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But if you're given a 5 o'clock start time, doing that local work, that's your start time. This is where having not necessarily an EWD, but even having something such as Logbook Checker or an electronic system on your phone, you feed those times in there, it will pick it up. We've had it where guys have said, you know, I put it down, but it said that I could only work for 10 hours for the day. I can't understand what it is. Or you get a mate ring me and tell me. And then you go back and have a look and say, mate, well, when you look at the week's worth of work, it's telling you can only work 10 hours because you're actually going to go over on your maximum hours for the week, and they didn't realise that they would.
Yeah.
So,
you see that a lot. And it's hard to do. Like, I mean, it's hard to do in your head. You know, to calculate those hours over a 7-day period, 2 weeks, whatever it is, it's really hard to do. So if you've got some sort of a tool, whether it's an EWD or like a, you know, logbook checker, whatever it might be, something that can just help you with, you know, calculating those hours over those periods, I think, you know, use whatever you can.
Yep. Hubfleet, any of them that are app on your phone are fantastic for doing it there. So Hubfleet's one, Logmaster's another one. They're EWD as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. So when it comes to fatigue management and going on to BFM, the only reason that I would say don't go on to BFM is because you have to use a work diary all the time. And what's my pet hate with work diaries?
Fines.
Clerical errors. Fines for clerical errors, and getting knocked off $880 for not marking a box up the very top.
Yeah, crazy.
Right now,
just crazy.
I won't drag my soapbox out. Brendon actually made me leave it in the car, so I don't carry on about that because it really pisses me off that so many people do get knocked off for clerical errors. The NHVR, normally pretty good with it. They normally will just give you a bit of a warning, the inspectors on the side of the road, and say, mate, you've missed a box back there, just go back and fix it. The Highway Patrol, renowned for doing it.
Yeah.
We do fatigue management training a lot, and it comes back all the time. Anyone that's been knocked off, it's normally Highway Patrol will knock them off, and they will go and find every single error. I had one guy, and he said that when the copper came to him and said, oh, well, that's about $4,000 worth of fines there. That'll probably be enough to teach you a lesson. I won't go back any further. Yeah. Now, it really burns me that this happens there. But, you know, at least they do coffee with a cop and they pull over and they'll give you blend 43 in a cup. Just shits me.
Yeah, that's
so
fantastic.
Sorry, I won't keep going on about it. So that's my big issue there is the fines. The best way to get away from those fines is to run an EWD.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you've got nothing to hide, the EWD will do a number of things for you, right? I have been said before, oh, Bruce gets a backhander from the NHVR because he pushes EWDs, you idiot. And the guy knows if you listen to this, you are an idiot, Tim. So that's just ridiculous. Okay, we just look at this and see that people don't get caught out. As long as you've got nothing to hide, right? And you should be right to be able to work within your hours. So if you've got an EWD, you can run an EWD on 12 hours, but this is a good reason to go into BFM because the BFM, you've got to go and do training only once at this stage. You do your BFM training, you've got your certificate, take it with you wherever you go. If the company's accredited, you can do it. The company has to be accredited for you to operate on it, or you can be an ABN holder and you can be accredited. The company has to go through an audit and you have to do a medical 49 years and under every 3 years, 50 and over every 12 months. Okay, so that's sort of the drawbacks of it, I suppose you'd say, and the criteria. But what it allows you is that you can have up to 14 hours. Your breaks are stretched out, where on standard hours, in 5.5 hours, you can only work 5.25. On BFM, in 6.25 hours, you can work 6. Now, that may change with these new tables that are coming out. We haven't seen these tables yet, but it does allow you to work longer. And some drivers will say, oh, I don't want to do that because they're just trying to work my fingers to the bone. But when you start watching your hours correctly, you find that you sometimes get very, very close to breaching, or you do breach. Yeah. You might be back at the yard fueling up in the afternoon and you're breaching when you're fueling up and you don't even realise. Yeah. And that boils down to what's work and rest. So work is anything to do with the truck, fueling it, washing it, blackening the tyres, walking around doing your checks, kicking your mud flaps off at the back there, coupling and uncoupling, everything you're doing with the vehicle, filling out paperwork to do with work inside the vehicle.
Yeah, your load sheets or whatever you might do, dockets, that's all of that stuff is classed as work,
If you're observing the load, getting loaded, so you can't say that I'm in a quarry and I was getting loaded. If you're watching the loader, put the load in the back, that is regarded.
Talking to him on the two-way and saying,
talking on the radio.
Any of that,
At one company we went to, and they had remember the one up in Brisbane we went to? Yeah. They'd had a couple of major incidents, and they had a driver's room. So they said, no, we do it really well. The driver goes over and the driver stands in the driver's room and he's got nothing to do with the loading. He's right away from the truck and it's air conditioned. We've got a fruit bowl in there and we've got a vending machine and we look after them. I said, that's great. What's with that UHF radio sitting on the wall there? That's so we can talk to the forklift loader operator. I said, well, they can't register a brake, mate.
Because that's work.
That is work.
Yeah.
Right? And that is how the law works. So that in there basically would breach a driver by talking to the loader operator. So they had it nicely set up, but it can't be put down as a brake.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the worst ones we would probably see is guys going into a yard and straight away they'll register they're having a brake.
Yeah.
So, yep, I have a brake, but they're in there getting loaded. Most companies have got CCTV footage. And we've seen this happen where a company up in Queensland, one of their drivers only had a small fleet of trucks. One of their drivers was involved in a fatality. That driver was actually killed, who ran into the back of a truck, pulled out in front of him, and the driver was asleep, had plenty of room to change lanes and go around, but he didn't. He ran straight up the back of the truck that had pulled out that was heavy, and he was killed. They did an investigation on the company. They started looking at fatigue immediately. They looked at everybody in the company, not just one driver, and not just the killed driver. And when they were looking at that, they looked at one guy there and they noticed that when he went in to get loaded, he put down the place where he was getting loaded. They investigate everything very thoroughly. They got camera footage from there. This is all gospel. And I saw this footage and it showed when the driver put down that he was having a break, that he was drawing his curtains. And he was restraining his load, drawing his curtains, and off he was going there. So that driver got done. He got prosecuted and so did the company.
Yeah.
It's constant, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, and that's one of the things people don't realise. You don't actually have to have had an incident to be prosecuted either. You know, so if for whatever reason something's happened, you know, the anonymous hotline, whatever it might be, something's happened and they come in and start looking, they can actually prosecute you without having had an incident, purely just because of your practices and what's been going on in there, and if they find breaches and all that sort of thing, exactly like what you're talking about. So that obviously occurred on the back of an incident, but you don't have to have had one. You know, you might have a disgruntled employee that's bloody, you know, made a complaint or whatever it might be. Something like that can then trigger them to start looking, and the more they find, the more they dig, and that's when it gets ugly.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It's the more they find, the more they dig. So if they come in and they think, you know what, you guys manage everything really well.
Yeah.
You've got a non-conformance system in place. You're addressing fatigue issues. You do training. You do this and that. Fantastic. They can be okay with you. But if they start finding incidents, that's an issue. Remember the one that we went into one time and the two investigators came in and they had another bloke came in and he looked like he was in his 60s, had
With
little
his
weaselly glasses and he had a cardigan on. That's exactly right. So we piss take a fair bit. So this guy was wearing a blue cardigan. That's what we both remembered. And they just said, oh, this is Kevin. Kevin's here on work experience with a bit of a smirk on their face. And we're all there talking. This guy's just sitting there watching. And they're looking at day sheets that the company had on there. And he starts looking at these day sheets upside down. And he starts questioning the day sheets. And Kevin was not on work experience. Kevin was a prosecutor who came in with them and straight away started having a look at these sheets and was commenting on the brakes and saying, these brakes aren't correct. These guys are breaching. And we actually point out, no, they're not. They're actually doing it right. So the NHVR doesn't get it right all the time either. Yeah. But the way he was reading them, but he was looking at it straight away. So when it comes to local work, and this is the next thing, if you're not running BFM hours, fatigue managed hours, and you're just running around doing local work within your 100, there is a really big urban myth out there that you don't have to record your times. And that's absolutely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, you still have to manage your fatigue and you still got to record your work and rest. So you can't just, you know, throw the rule book out and think, no, well, I'm within the 100 Ks, I don't have to do anything, because it's not the case. You still got to do it. You still got to record your work and rest. The companies still have to check it. They still have to manage it just exactly like you would with work diaries. It's exactly the same. You're just not required to do it on a work diary. That's all.
Yep.
So, yeah, huge urban myth out there, and we see it all the time. Where, you know, companies running interstate and doing that sort of stuff, but they've got these little guys doing local stuff and not recording a thing. So, yeah, that's something we see all the time. You know, companies have these good systems in place. And just on the work diary bit, the electronic work diary bit there, I think people are probably scared of them, and we see a lot of negativity around them. But what they do is that they actually buy you time because you can record it minute by minute, whereas in a paper diary, it's in 15-minute increments, as we know. But when it's recorded minute by minute, you could potentially say you hit rest and you're resting for 10 minutes. Now, on a paper diary, that's not going to be a rest break.
That's right.
On a legal work diary, it's still not going to be recorded as a legal rest break because it's not 15 minutes, but it's still 10 minutes rest. So it's still 10 minutes that you will save in your day.
Yep.
And that accumulates over the day, over the week, over the fortnight. So those 5-minute, 10-minute breaks, any opportunity where you can have rest, whilst it doesn't log it as a rest break according to the fatigue laws, so your standard 15-minute break, 30-minute break, that sort of thing, it doesn't record it as that. It's still rest. It's not work. Yep. So you're not accumulating work hours, work time. So that's where it's a real benefit. And we've seen people really, the productivity side of it really increase because of those small rest breaks that they're able to take.
That's right. So when I was doing a fatigue course, actually a COR course recently, and I had an operator come down from Newcastle. He's a good friend of ours, but they're really good company, with a couple of the girls out of the office to understand a bit more about this. And we were talking about EWDs, and they've introduced them in their company. They're a BFM company. They do heavy haulage, mainly heavy haulage, a bit of bitumen and a few other things. Yeah. And he said that by them with the EWD, he said he was sceptical at first, but he said they save them around half an hour a day because of exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It actually keeps giving them time there, and he said, and it saves them half an hour a day. Yeah. He said it actually works beautifully. He said he never went in even knowing that. Yeah. I'd heard rumours of that, but to hear it from the operator saying it and saying what a benefit it was a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't actually know it either. It was actually Josh from Logmaster. I'll give him a shout out. And there's heaps of different systems out there. Logmaster is just one of them. But yeah, he actually taught me about it, that it actually does that because it's a minute by minute thing. So yeah, it's not banking that legal required 15-minute break because it's less than 15 minutes, but it's also not recording work in that time. So you can bank that time. And if they're saving half an hour a day, you look at that across, an entire fleet, across an entire year, it adds up pretty bloody quickly.
Sure does, yeah. So there was an incident that we're involved with. We want to talk about some incidents on here because this is real life and this is how we get to learn what we've been doing. It was a local company, fairly large company in Sydney. Basically, they had a driver who had a dispute with the owner. The driver punched the owner in the face and knocked him out, so they sacked the bloke and he was charged and whatever else. So this guy went to the NHVR hotline and put in a complaint about this company and said that he left the company because they were working him around the clock. There was 4 trucks that they had that did particular run that went out west, and he drove one of those. He gave the 3 rego numbers of the other 3 trucks. He reported them. So I get a call from the company. They said, we've received a notice. Can you come and have a look at it? And eventually put 2 and 2 together. And knowing a couple of the investigators eventually came out that this is who it was that did it. I hate the fact that this NHVR anonymous hotline is anonymous because there's normally 3 sides to a story. And in this case, the driver was just doing it to be a dick, and the company got pulled through the ringer big time with this. And it was obvious that this driver was just disgruntled, but the company got pulled through the ringer as a result. One of the things that we found when we were looking is this company, these trucks were, the drivers were filling out a day sheet, and then they had manifests. Now, they actually say by law that you have to check everything. And when we get a notice come in, they want to see that you have checked everything. So when I say that, they want, with this particular company, they wanted fuel dockets, they wanted phone records. This is of the 3 drivers that drove these trucks. So they wanted fuel dockets, they wanted phone records, they wanted pay slips, they wanted manifests, they wanted day sheets of those trucks there. They wanted longitude and latitude of their satellite tracking,
from the tracking
on a Excel spreadsheet, and all of this type of stuff there to go and compare them. So, of course, I'm preparing all of this information. And when I'm looking at it, he's one of the guys there, and he was putting down 1.5 hours rest when he was out west at a big country town. But then his manifest showed that he was doing drop-offs for that 1.5 hours. Mate, come on. So the worst thing here was that the company hadn't picked this up. And the fact that they hadn't picked it was only the one guy, but the fact that it hadn't been checked. So you got all this paperwork coming in, you should be checking this. What do they look for? We want to see that you have acknowledged this, you have pulled the driver in, you've stopped it, you've put a non-conformance in place. Non-conformances, please, you've got to use them.
Yeah.
All right. If there was an NCR in place, show it had been acknowledged, we could say it. The only thing that was a bit of a bonus at this time with his company was that driver was only on as a casual, and after that particular incident, they hadn't brought him back. And I said, don't bring him back, because it was only a couple of weeks earlier. And I said, don't bring him back. I said, he's breaching, he's thrown you under a bus. They didn't even know. But that's how easily you can get caught out. So your times that you record have got to be real time. When you have a break, it has to be exactly when you have that break. Yeah. When you start again, it has to be when you start again. You can't fudge those times. And that's why you can't go in excess of 5.25 hours on a work diary and not have it completed and say, I was going to fill it out at the end of the day. You're not allowed to. No. You've got to fill it out as you go. When there's a change, you have to complete it. Yeah. When you stop, you have to mark down that you've stopped there and then. And then when you start again, put down where you've started.
Yeah, and it's got to be accurate. And the key thing there is they had GPS tracking, so the data's there, like the information's there. You can't hide from that. And even if you don't have it, there's gantries, there's red light cameras. So if something happens, they're going to find out. Like you said before, CCTV footage from, the place across the road that you were loading, whatever it is. Like they will find out if something happens and you're being investigated and you've fudged your times, it'll get found.
Yeah. So every gantry you go underneath for your tolls will pick you up. Every time you go through a weigh station, it will pick you up. Mobile phone cameras will pick you up. The red light cameras, all of these cameras actually trigger when you go through, speed cameras. Heavy vehicles, that number plate recognition, every NHVR vehicle you pass, every highway patrol you pass, accident investigation car you pass, they all run number plate recognition. They can actually link those together. So the guys that are out there going, oh, no, she's all right, mate, it just fetched me work diary, right? Now, that's back in Ian Pendon's day. Ian, we know what you used to do back in the day, mate, and all your mates there. But as you know, mate, and Ian and I are good mates, and we discuss this sort of stuff a lot there, but back in those days, that was easy enough to do, but the technology now won't let you do it. And Ian's a compliance guy and been around for a lot of years now and helped a lot of companies from the moment he got into doing this. And he knew how they used to get around it, so he knew what they had to do to try and fix it. And he's helped heaps and heaps of companies do it there, and he's works with us, and he still goes and challenges the government and the regulator constantly, doesn't he? He just gives them hell, trying to make it a better industry out there because it burns him and makes him boil. But that's the thing that happens. Back in those days, you could get around with it, and guys would run 2 books and do all that stuff. But anyone that's trying to do that shit now is just completely living in the dark ages.
Well, I mean, yeah, you might be getting away with it, for a while, or, you might do it for years and get away with it for years. But it's that day when that notice comes in or you have that incident that you're going to wish you weren't doing it for that long, And look, just to be clear, I don't necessarily agree with the fatigue laws. Like, I think they make it very hard because there's times there where, as a driver, you don't feel tired, but you're forced to stop. Yep. And then there's other times there where you probably feel tired, but you know that you can't stop at that time because that's not going to suit the work that you're doing, the job that you've got to get to, because then you're going to stop when you get there, or you've got to reach this certain point, or you're going to do a changeover or whatever. So I think it can also create issues as far as fatigue goes, the way that the laws are now. But unfortunately, that's what they are. Yeah. Like, we can all sit here and complain about them. That's not going to help anyone. Look, we'll see what these new models come out like, and hopefully they're a bit more flexible and give people a bit more options around when they can and can't stop. And hopefully that will address a lot of it, but we don't know yet. But I think, the way they are now, just sort of cookie cutter, everyone has to do it this way. I think can really raise issues when it comes to fatigue.
It can, and especially when at the end of it, they were designed for line haul.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all that they were worked around. I will make them stop at this time because they could be fatigued. If you're running around in a truck and dog or a float or a semi-trailer doing deliveries for Woolies or whatever else, running around the city in heavy traffic all day, I don't really think you're going to get fatigued during the day.
No.
I think there is so much going on around you that it actually keeps you awake.
Yeah.
But you still have to stop and abide by those laws. And it's bloody hard if you're running a truck that's running in city areas to find a spot they can pull up. They're not allowed to pull over on the side of the freeway.
Where do you pull up? Exactly.
They pull over in a side street, council can knock them off.
Yeah.
Like it's really difficult for them to do this.
The tip site, they're getting told to get out because there's no room.
Yeah.
And then they pull up out the front and they're getting told to move from there. Traffic controllers are telling them to move, so they pull up on the M4 somewhere or, on a freeway somewhere. It's just, they make it really hard. We don't, we know the challenges, we understand them, but we're just trying to, find ways to help people understand that doesn't, complaining and bitching that it's all bullshit doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, that's right.
You need to be aware of what can happen and what you need to do to try and protect yourself, protect your businesses. Yeah, but it's bloody hard.
It is, and even when you talk about that there, and people will give you every reason under the sun.
Yeah.
One company we're out doing a toolbox meeting with, and one of the drivers was there going, "You don't understand. By the time I go and do this first round, I can't stop on the way back." And I said, "So what? You go in there, you get your first load, you tip it off, and then when you're due for a break, when you're heading back in, there's nowhere to stop." Yeah. I said, "Well, won't you have it when you've tipped off?" I said, "You've got to understand." I said, "If you kill someone," I said, "let's just cut all of the crap. Let's say someone suicided in front of you. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
They will still come and investigate you with a suicide, right?" And I said, "If that happens and you go to court and you say to the judge exactly what you've told me," I said, "he'll just lock you up for being stupid," because there's no excuse. And every time you're going to make that excuse, think about standing in front of a judge with two barristers there trying to fight it out, and you're there making this excuse that you could have done. It was just inconvenient.
Yeah.
Right? And it's going to be inconvenient. The same as you can't sit in a rank waiting to go into a tip site or waiting to get loaded or at the wharves or whatever else there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm just having a break. I'm going to mark a break while I'm here."
Yeah,
now,
you're creeping forward.
we all do it, but if that truck moves, you're not braking.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what can't happen. So New South Wales states that you can actually have a break behind the wheel of a truck with the engine running in the driver's seat. New South Wales is the only law that states that.
Yeah.
Because they basically ask for it, because each state still goes on their own views. And I don't know why, but that's
a whole other argument, that one. Yeah.
Canal. And
heavy vehicle national law.
Yeah. Bullshit. Yeah. So
national law.
Yeah, I know. And so with that one there, in New South Wales, you can be sitting behind the wheel. On other states, you've got to be in the passenger seat or you've got to be out of the truck and the engine switched off and whatever. But if you're in a rank, and it clearly states this in New South Wales, if you're in a rank, you have to pull out of the rank and park and then go back into the rank if you're due for a break. So it just makes it very difficult. Again, easy when you're sitting behind a desk to say, "Oh, that's all right. They can just pull out and then they can just pull back in again." It's just not that simple, is it?
Yeah, that's great when you, like, on paper, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, we'll just do that.
Yeah.
But try and implement that in the real world and, good luck.
That's like trying to tell a 5-star chef how to cook and say he hasn't actually cooked this properly when you're only good at 2-minute noodles. So it's ridiculous. But that's what...
I kind of got that one. I'm not sure if that worked, but that's okay.
It works for me. So just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So the fatigue thing is a thing. So, let's go back to this bit when you're allocating your fleet of drivers. Your start time you're given is your start time that's got to be given. Pre-trip inspection and whatever else they're doing is regarded as work. Yeah. So you can't mark down that you're having a break if you're actually working. If you're watching the loading happening, you're working. If you're watching it loading or unloading, you're regarded as work. We had a guy one time who I spoke to, he was driving a bulk pressure tanker and he was pulled over by the task force down in Victoria. This one astounded me, but when you hear these stories, you think, wow, And he was pulled over. One of the task force was super nice. It was a real, good cop, bad cop. chatting to him about things, telling him how nice his truck was. It's an older truck. Asked how many Ks it done. Geez, you keep it good. And yes, I do. And he said, do you own the tank on the back? And he said, no, that belongs to the company. And he said, oh, right. And he said, geez, it's immaculate. Oh, yeah, they give me the oldest tank because I look after it. Oh, that's really good. And he said, is it all digital? Do you know when you're loading and unloading? And he said, no, I've got to watch it. He said, on your work diary here, he said, where you've put down you've had a break there and you've got a break here for, I can't remember the times, but let's say it was an hour's break. And he said, but you got 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after where you've got a little mark on either side. He said, oh, that's just when I've put the mark there to show that I've pulled up, but I'm actually setting it up to unload. And then the other mark there is the 15 minutes of packing it all up. Okay, and then you have your break in there. He goes, yeah. And he goes, oh, right. So what do you do when you're having a break? He said, I just sit in the cabin, have a sandwich with the engine running and let it do it. He said, and how do you know when it's empty? He said, I just keep an eye on the mirror there. And he said, because it's an older one, when the hose starts flapping up and down on the ground, I know that it's empty. And he said, right. So he said, you're actually working when you're putting down your resting, and they charged him for it.
Yeah.
They breached him for it.
Yeah.
So this is how
you're
silly
watching
it gets.
that.
Yeah, because you're
process.
watching it.
Yeah.
That's how silly it is. So
It's
a lot of
ridiculous.
guys over there going, this is bullshit. Yeah,
Yep,
we
it
agree.
is.
But
It is bullshit.
that's the law,
Yeah.
right? So we call that pub talk. You'll hear me talk about pub talk, and that is because we can go and have a bourbon or a beer, if Brendon's shouting, and we can go and have a bourbon or a beer, and we can talk about that and say how crap it is, but that's in the pub. But at the end of the day, this is a law, and we're trying to explain to you what you have to do and why you've got to be very, very careful of what you mark down.
Yeah.
Float operators. Wow.
Yeah, because, I mean, most of them, the majority of them, are going to be working that whole time.
Yeah.
You know, that whole loading process, putting
I
the
think
machine
they-
on the back,
yeah.
chaining them down.
And I think
know.
the smaller floats, we're not talking big platforms and running
No.
mining gear, but the ones that are running around locally, moving excavators and all
Yeah.
of that sort of stuff through all your towns, and they're running 3-axle and quad floats and whatever, and they're running around everywhere, moving machinery there. They've got to comply with curfews,
Yeah.
which makes it very hard, and they've also got to comply with the fatigue laws as well. And a lot of them will put down that they're loading, that they're having a break when they're actually loading or unloading. They can see when you go in, they can see when you come out. There will be footage in there. You've got to be very, very careful marking down you're having a break.
Yeah.
And while you're in there doing that, because you can get caught, guys. And we've seen guys, and there was actually 2 that we know of. There was 2 suicides in Sydney that happened on the same week, both with float companies. One of them, I knew the driver of the truck. The other one, I knew the guy that actually owned the vehicle. Both of them got investigated them.
Yeah.
Both of them had fatigue breaches.
The other thing is, too, is if you're loading an excavator or a front-end loader or whatever it might be, chances are that bit of plant has GPS tracking on it as well.
Exactly.
Has telematics in it as well. So in the event of a incident, fatality, whatever it may be, they could pull that data from that machine and know when it was kicked over and know when it was loaded onto the truck, not just, you know, you were having a break. That data from the actual item of plant could tell them when it happened as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you'll be very, very careful.
So it is all about big brothers watching you, and the idea is just don't cut corners.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you record your times accurately and you put them down. And just one last thing there, and this is probably a topic to have afterwards, is about when it comes down to the crossover between work or safety and then fatigue management.
Yeah.
And where people just go, well, am I working, am I driving? Now, we've got a few cases of that,
Yeah.
and we're just about an hour's up here, so we might just sort of come back on that one next week. But you have to be very, very aware that there is a crossover with those times, and so you have to be very, very careful where that line comes in.
Yeah.
So I think that's another topic to discuss, because there's a lot of people who try and work around that, such as, oh, well, the guy's working in the workshop for the day and then he's jumping in and driving a truck.
Yeah, it's a minefield, that one.
It absolutely is. And it's probably one of the only slightly grey areas that we would look at there, because there's always arguments about that.
Yeah.
But I think that we'll come back and we'll discuss that one next week, Brendon.
Sounds good.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Thanks, guys.